So we decided to do it on Friday nights because that was like my favorite part of the week. You know, we'd normally sit down and talk about whatever. Right. You know, no stress. You know, work is done. I'm already paid.
I haven't paid you yet, so you gotta be nice.
Yeah. And then, so I said, why don't we take those conversations and make a podcast out of it? But that was the best part of my week. And now it's gone. I turned it into more work. I can't, now it's a big production, you know?
Well, it makes you famous.
Slightly famous.
Well, when I was at the physical therapy the other day, one of the girls there has been following us. She said, hey, you guys remind me of Click and Clack. My dad used to listen to them all the time when I was growing up. He worked at a car repair place, and you guys remind me of Click and Clack. And I said, yeah, well, we don't say, don't drive like my brother.
Yeah, should we put a New England accents on? Start dropping the eyes.
About your car? You want to talk about your car and Harvard Yard?
The floor.
Yeah.
You know, I had not a super thick, because I grew up in Worcester.
Worcester. You grew up in Worcester.
See, it's gone. That was the point of the story. It's gone. Oh, somebody just hit us with 2 questions. Okay, perfect timing.
Well, let's talk about the wrenching one if you want to talk about that.
Best tip for someone who's never wrenched before, getting a Haynes book?
Well, you know, the first thing you go out and do is you buy a broken motorcycle and not have enough money to pay for it. And then get an estimate and go, oh man, what am I going to do now? And then you go out and buy a manual and then you figure out how to do it. Because that's how everybody got started. They bought a bike that they liked, it didn't run or it didn't run for long, it was in bad shape, and they looked at it for a while in their living room, and then finally they decided to take it apart, and they began to figure out what was going on. It's basically how I started buying, broken stuff and doing it.
I started by fixing your broken stuff.
That's right.
The bikes that were just going to sit here unless they were turned into something.
We started with the economy scramblers.
Which was perfect, because when I started, I had no idea.
Should I tell them the story?
You remember. I remember one time I was like, because, I never had anything that could be fixed, and B, didn't have a toolkit, a full one.
Well, we always tell the story about Mikey's first days in the shop when over here where our hammers and adjustable wrenches are, and I said, Mikey, hand me a hammer, and he went over and handed me an adjustable wrench. And he hates it when we say that story.
I don't know how true that's.
Yeah. Well, I know how true it is because I was on the other end of it.
But I do remember, like, one of my first weeks here, I was using, like, needle nose pliers to hold a bolt down, and you came up and you're like, why would you? And I was like, I don't know.
Why would you use a wrench?
Because anytime I've ever done anything, all I had was a pair of needle nose pliers. But after the 5th budget scrambler, it started to click.
Right.
And I think I'm pretty.
You're getting there.
Pretty good.
Yeah, you're getting there now. I don't want to give you. You'll get a big.
I'm a good mechanic.
Yeah.
Maybe not you.
Well, I mean, most of it is wanting to learn and doing it and paying attention.
And being humble enough to ask you questions.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
It's what everybody does. It's, nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
So you just got 2 questions.
Oh, yeah. We answered the last one. Okay, yeah. Fix a...
Buy something that you can't afford and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah. And honestly, the books are hard. Like, they don't give you much information.
Some of the climber manuals have this little handy guy with the wrenches in his hand. They say give you tips. Most of the manuals still take for granted that you know a little something about doing something, and they tell you to check the thread pitch or something. They figure you understand what that means. So you got to bring something to the game.
Well, and you have your Haynes and you have your climber, and the Haynes is really good for their wiring diagrams.
Well, they're in color.
Yeah, they're in color.
I think the climbers, some of the climbers are, but all the Haynes were.
Yeah. You guys have mentioned GS conversion. What does it entail? Tank, suspension, fenders?
Well, the conversions that we talk about on GSs are where we take the R80ST, which is the street version of the GS, and turn it into a tubeless tire GS. We also have conversions where we take the pre-70 Earl's front end chassis and we put the post-70 running gear in them. Those are conversions also.
I think he's talking about the ST, the GS conversion.
Okay.
Which we kind of make our own GS. You know, every ST we do a...
Well, we respond to the owner's needs.
Yeah.
And we try to, when they tell us certain things of what they're going to do, then we tailor the bike to be what that they want to be. But I mean, you know.
But what I'm saying is we've got the rear fender that we do. It's not a GS thing, but Chuck does it.
Well, we take it a service
really
rear
good.
fender, and we didn't like the way it looked, and so we changed some. We took some of the valance out, and we changed some things in it to make it what we felt looked better, but still have the like duckbill look instead of having the turn down look that the stock one does, because it's just kind of opens it up. It looks a little nicer.
And it's longer, so that you don't get sprayed.
Well, it's longer because instead of turning down, it turns out.
Yeah.
So, you know, but we still need the inner fender from the stock fender because it's short. And in order to keep the mud and dirt off of the spring on the shock, we have to take the front of the stock fender and then wire tie it to the service fender, and then stick it down at the bottom, attach it at the bottom, so it's one big fender. It's two fenders. It's part stock and part service, and then the service is modified.
Yeah.
To do what we want.
And then we also do wiring. We change. I don't know how much you want to give away on that.
Well, you know, wiring's wiring.
Because
you know.
in the beginning we had the problem with the ST wiring harness. And
Well, we realized that the cheapest thing and quickest thing and best thing to do for the future was to put a GS wiring harness. That way, if someone is working on the bike in the future, they go and they look at what it says for a GS rather than an ST that we've modified, and then they get lost. So, and it was easier for us. It made a better presentation rather than cut up stuff and shrink wrap stuff and that kind of stuff. So,
which, as a mechanic, that's one of the hardest things in the world. Is when someone's taken, and then you're looking at the wiring diagram you should be looking at, but nothing's lining up, and you have to decide, was this an R80 monoshock wiring harness that someone tried to put on a, you know, just takes time.
Well, we started taking a pre-70 conversion apart today. Garrett did, and the wiring is homemade, and so we'll end up putting a new /5 wiring harness and then making it so that you can go to a /5 wiring harness, wiring diagram, and fix the bike rather than this. Plus, half the time they wire stuff with all the same color wires, so it's well, I guess they got a bargain on blue wire, so it's all blue. Can't tell what goes where.
What's the famous Dean quote? The process of unfucking something takes twice as long as fixing it.
Right, when people tell us, well, how much is it going to cost? Because we got to figure out what you did, and then we have to. You know, but then the carryover from that was, people shouldn't be allowed to work on our motorcycles. And then I'd say, and who sent your kids through college? And he'd go, good point. So, what else we got?
And he also said, also able to be done on a 79 R65. Just got it and not sure which direction I want to go.
Well, he's making a dual sport bike out of it? GS?
Yeah, I'm assuming.
Well, the R65 is a great dual sport bike. It's 4 inches narrower to begin with, and it's geared short, and it's a short stroke, quick revving motor. So you got everything you need for basic woods stuff for running through the woods and running off road.
Yeah.
We did one a long time ago. We put an upside down front end on it, and we took a Bultaco tank and we did the Bumblebee black with the yellow stripe in it. We put a solo seat on it. Small headlight. We changed the shock angles in the back. That's still a twin shock bike. So, and then we put knobbies on it. I mean, that's a great woods bike because it's light and it's nimble and it's geared real well for running off road. So one of our customers that we're doing the R90S for, Moreland, suggested that we tell motorcycle travel stories.
Yeah.
And then he told me some stories, and I said, well, I will tell the people that will tell the story about you telling us the story, but we won't tell your story, because I can't remember what his story was. But we can tell motorcycle stories. You know, if we want to tell motorcycle stories, we can tell stories about what happened on the road and here and there.
Yeah. Well, I can't.
Well,
I don't have any good ones. You know?
Let's see. I left Athens, Ohio in March one year. It was raining. It was a cold rain. I was going to Rutgers in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I left, it was raining, and by the time I got to Wheeling, West Virginia, it was hailing. And then I was on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was snowing. And there were very few cars on the road. There were some tractor trailers. And I was on my 67 R69S with an Avon Air fairing on it. And I was driving down the road, and I saw on the right-hand side of the road a Volkswagen bus that was broken down. And I saw these guys, as I went by, they were waving at me, and by that point I was completely frozen. And so I drove by them, and I got off at the next exit. I couldn't feel my hands, so I couldn't get anything out of my pockets at the toll booth. And they waved me on, and I went to the first motel. And I got to the motel, and I said, I need a room, but I can't give you any money right now. And then I came back and said, I can't open the doorknob. And they came and they opened the door for me, and I said, I can't feel the shower. Can you turn the shower on and temper the water for me, which they did. And then it took me about an hour to get all my clothes off, and I spent about 2 hours in the shower. I got done, and I had another set of clothing, and I put the clothes, I had another set for the next day, and I watched the weather, and it was snowing that morning, but they said it was going to clear up. So I got on my bike, and I headed to New Brunswick, and I hung out with my friends. Well, I came back, and on the way back in Wheeling, I saw this guy hitchhiking. It was my friend Red. And Red was, and he recognized me, and I recognized him, and I grabbed all the brake I could at the last minute. And as I got next to him, the bike went out from under me, and I slid by him. And he was looking at me, hey, Red, and I stopped. And I said, he had his eyes got big, and I said, you need a ride? He goes, man, I've been here for 3 hours. I can't get a ride. And I go, well, this giant duffel bag. And so we strapped the duffel bag over behind him on the seat. It had a double seat, and it was over my taillight. By the time we got the 300 miles down the road, the taillight was hanging, and he was holding on to this stuff. But I got him back home. And so we got back home, and I dropped him off. And a couple days later, I was at work. I worked at this leather store. And my friend Mark came in. Mark was had chickens. He fought fighting cocks, and he was actually the Rookie of the Year. He's on the cover of this magazine called Grit and Steel. Mark was a real lunatic. Anyway, Mark said, were you on the Pennsylvania Turnpike a couple of weeks ago? I said, I was, as a matter of fact. He said, didn't you see us in a Volkswagen bus on the side of the road? I said, well, I saw a Volkswagen bus. He goes, we were broke down, and we were sitting, and there was no cars coming. And then way off in the distance, we saw a headlight, and we go, oh, here comes a car. We go, no, it's a motorcycle. I go, what fucking idiot would be out here on a motorcycle? And then we said, hey, it's Nathan, and we started waving at you, and you just drove straight on by us and never paid attention to us. I said, yeah, that was me. So that was a pretty good story. That was a pretty funny story. Another traveling story was I was going to a rally in upstate New York on my bike, and I had it apart the night before, and I was driving down the road, and all of a sudden the bike started running on one cylinder. I checked and found out I had no spark. It was dark out, and so I pulled over, and I had with me, I used to make these bags out of 14-ounce canvas, for duck canvas, where they would go around the tank, cut out for the filler. They'd go around the tank and come up the sides. You'd stitch the sides with a speedy stitcher, and you'd put elastic in here. I kept all my stuff in here, stuff I wanted to eat, my chains and all this. Well, I kept my Moonglow Frisbee in there. And the Moonglow Frisbee was great because I broke down. I took it and held it in the light so it would glow. I took all the parts off from my bike, and I stuck in the Moonglow Frisbee so I could see. Well, in the meanwhile, I'm about to take this tank off, and a state trooper pulls up. And he says, oh, you broke down? I go, he says, can I help you? I said, yeah, if you could hold this tank. Well, the tank had a crossover underneath it, and I had 2 rubber covers that you use on brake bleeders, and I'd stuck them in there so that it wouldn't leak. And so he's holding it for me, and I'm doing this work. I figured out, I knew it was wrong, and I fixed the little wire, and all of a sudden he looks down, one of the rubbers have come off, and it's completely doused his right leg in gasoline. He just looks at me, and he throws the tank on the ground. Well, when the tank's out on the ground, one of the sides of my little thing flips up, and underneath it is a little leather pouch where all my contraband is. And it flips over, and he looks at it, and then he looks at his leg, And he just jumps in his car and wheels off and goes down the road. Never said a word to me. I put my bike back together and had it on there. But this thing flipped over. My bag of weed fell on the ground. And he just looked at me for a second. He looked at his leg dripping in gasoline. He just got in his car and drove away. I said, well, it could have been worse.
Yeah.
So
I have it's not a motorcycle story, but it's a similar. So I worked in Yellowstone for a summer before I started working here. And
you and Yogi and Boo Boo?
Yeah, when you work in Yellowstone, it's the ultimate police state. Like, the rangers are just like out to get you. I don't know how they're profiting off of it, but they must be bored. Anyways, so if you drive along like 2 a.m., you're getting pulled over. And I was coming back from Washington State, so it was about 2 a.m. And I got pulled over by a cop, and my taillights weren't working, I guess. And he comes and he's giving the whole thing. He's like, have you been smoking tonight? And I'm like, nah, I don't smoke. And he goes, then what are those green shavings on your lap? And I looked down and I picked up my pants and I realized it was a booger. And I said, I held it up for him to see. I was like, that's a booger. Do you want to take a closer look? And he was like, nah. Yeah.
I was on Route 50, I think in Nevada, and it's known as the loneliest highway in America.
Yeah.
And I was driving I had my R80 GS, and you go down the road a little bit. I think I left Vegas or something, and first thing you see is a phone booth. It says, has a sign over it. This is when they had phone booths. It said, the loneliest phone booth in America. Anyway, I drove down the road, and I stopped at this town to get some ice cream or something, and I saw a guy gassing up another GS, and I pulled over to him, and he said, there's a great hot springs not far from here. This guy had this whole book with all the hot springs in this country. There's a great hot springs down here, but it's down a 4-mile sandy road, and I'm afraid to go by myself because I'm afraid if I fall over, I'll never get up. So I said, all right, let's go, and we went down the road, and I got down the road, and at 45 minutes later, he was paddling, with his feet the whole way, and we got there, and there was another guy who was an Alaskan tour guide, and he had a Volkswagen bus.
That sounds like the perfect way to get murdered.
Yeah, well,
yeah, you meet a stranger on the world's loneliest highway and follow him to a hot spring.
So we pull up, and we get out. We get off the motorcycles, and the guy with the bus is already in the hot springs. So we take off our clothes. We get in the hot springs. It's getting to be sunset. It's gorgeous out. There's eagles and stuff flying around, and we pass a joint around. We're feeling good, and all of a sudden we hear this noise, and we turn around, and here's a tour bus coming down the road, and the tour bus pulls in, and like 50 people get out. It's like dusk. We're in the middle of nowhere. And so we go, oh, God, this is terrible. So we get out and we get dressed, and we all go our separate ways. Well, when I get off the road, it's a little tributary road, and I see the sign says Tonopah. And I go, oh, there's a Little Feat song. I've been to Atchipee to Tonopah. I said, I'm going to go down to Tonopah. So I make a left, and I start to head down, and I realize I'm low on gas, and I pull into a gas station. And this guy comes up, and he strikes up a conversation, and he says, oh, you're out? I see you got plates from Georgia. And I was talking. He goes, where you going? He goes, you're not going to that shithole Tonopah because of that song, are you? And I go, as a matter of fact, he goes, look, first of all, it's not worth going through. Second of all, you got to go through Area 51. You can't stop. They're going to pull you over. It's just not worth doing. He said, my suggestion is go find a place to camp, or go find a place up the road here and forget about that. I said, okay, thanks for the advice. I go out and make a right-hand turn. I start driving around. It's dark out. And way down this dirt road, I see an open sign. So I drive on down the sign, and I park my bike, and I pull in, and I go in, and there's a guy behind the bar restaurant, and there's 2 people sitting out there. And I walk inside and, looking for something to eat, and we start talking, and they all worked at Area 51 and tell me about the 3-legged animals that were there, and all their parents worked there, and they all, when all of them retired, none of them lived more than like a year. They all died of some weird disease. And then the woman told me how she had 2 little dogs, and they were in her courtyard, and a mountain lion came by and stole one of the dogs. Now she can't get her dog to go out. And then so I say to this guy, the guy says, well, I said, listen, can I camp out here? And the guy goes, nah, there's no place to camp. But I used to have a motel here. I have a old trailers, and you can have a room in the trailer. Just set up. It's got running water, and it's not hot water, but you can set your stuff up in there. So I say, great. I park my bike out in front of there, and I'm in there. And there's nothing works. My phone doesn't work. Nothing. I don't know what time it is. I just get undressed. I get in my sleeping bag. Well, middle of the night, I hear a car pull up, and this guy and this drunk girl get out. And they're falling down and carrying on and yelling and screaming. And there's a set of steps that go up. And so they just get on the steps and they're fucking on the steps. And I'm trying to sleep. And they're yelling and screaming. And finally they go in the room behind me and they're having fun. And so I'm awake. I said, well, there's no reason to try to go back to sleep. I pack all my stuff up.
You were sleeping in the love shack.
Yeah. And so I get on the bike and I drive back down the road and I make a right and I head towards this town. And the first town I get to is some town that has a gambling place in it. We're in Nevada. I pull into this gas station for gas. The guy's just opening up. We're shooting the shit about motorcycles, and I say, so where's a good place to get breakfast? Oh man, you go right down the street here for $5. You get fresh orange juice. You get everything. It's right in the casino. So I go into the casino and I get a chair by a little stool up there, and I start eating. This guy sits down next to me, and we start talking. Tells me he's out here in the desert to unbury his guns. He said he buried all his guns out here. He's coming out. He said, we should be able to have our guns and this kind of stuff. And then he says, my son's a policeman. He said, and the policemen are so badly outgunned by the outlaws. And he goes into this whole diatribe about guns and this, that, and the other. And I got a great breakfast, and finally I got out and headed on down the street.
Finally let you go.
Yeah. But that whole episode was actually a lot of fun.